Well, good morning, and this session is going to be me answering some of the questions you've put in the comments. So, and all I can say is, first of all, as ever, I'm here with Finn, although he's a bit sore this morning. He's getting on a bit, and I think he overdid it yesterday. So if he doesn't, he's trying to show willing at the moment, but he's a bit hobbly this morning. But anyway, he will join in, no doubt, at certain points. Can I just first of all say thank you very, very much for all the nice comments people have put. What a grown-up bunch, isn't it nice to see people using the internet and social media, YouTube, whatever, in a sensible way, exchanging things and making, you know, helpful contributions and all that sort of stuff. So and also it was really pleasing when I was looking at people's I'm not a great one, sorry for the IT and everything, but having found the relevant bits, very, very nice to be able to see familiar people again. So hello to those. Forgive me if I don't mention all the names and everything, but really good to see there people. Stephen Pope, look at his book. Don't forget Stephen Pope books there on the First World War tank crews. Lots of people there. A chap I think was on the Fury. You'll have to ask him about it if you ever meet him, Dave Voice. And anyway, some great names and things that way. And I've just got to point out this one. Some of you, if you're British of a certain age, you'll remember there was a programme called Out of Town with a guy called Jack Hargreaves who'd be with his pipe and just witter on so much, absolutely way ahead of his time, in the sense of he was like one of these YouTubers, like kind of this, like what I'm now doing, but, you know, we're talking back in the 70s. And he would talk about country ways, lifestyles, all sorts of things. But I've forgotten who actually mentioned that one, but what a compliment. Thank you for saying this is like a Jack Hargreaves thing. But why I mentioned that, because what interests me about that one is it's now being repeated on one of these Freeview channels somewhere or other. And all of a sudden, you know, and it's fascinating stuff, what that guy was saying anyway. Anyway, let's get on with answering some of your questions. So a couple of you have asked about the coat I was wearing in the cold weather. And this is where, again, it introduces a whole range of issues. But one of the guys says, I must ask you, the green smock you're wearing, is it possibly of Swedish origin? It is. Looks very much like the Swedish warm. If it is, it should have a label with the weight and length recommendations and a colour, red, green and brown. And that was from Uniform Mike 05. And then someone else came to me and says, is that Swedish M90 Parka you're wearing? The Coma coat, as we call it, best Parka around. So here's my embarrassment, because I do like some bits of, I used to collect a bit of uniform, and we no doubt talk about some of these things as I managed to grab it all down from the attic and various places. But if I was honest, that was a coat that I first bought many moons ago. And my phrase, I always sort of, you know, the excuse of buying another one and another one and another one and another one is this phrase of like, it's a dog walking coat. And I particularly liked it because it is, as they mention here, it's very warm. It was cheap. And this is another thing we'll come on to, this embarrassing British thing about talking about money all the time, or not talking about money, because we don't like saying these things and everything else. But I know I picked this up for next to nothing at some surplus, you know, one of the shows or an event somewhere many moons back, and I wore it a lot. And I bought another one, and I've got, actually, can you believe, and this is what I'll explain all the problems I seem to have, but the greedy boy syndrome, I've now got 3 of these things. I only wear one's still wrapped up, waiting for this day somehow where this one wears out, I seem to remember. And why do we like it? As these guys are saying, it's very warm. It's not waterproof, but it's kind of showerproof type thing. I'm not a great synthetic fibre person, but you have to say this one kind of works for you. It really does keep you warm. The pockets, the outsides of the pockets are lined in a manner of the fleece, so they keep your hands warm. It's got, to me, again, all these things, why do we like certain things, a good length to it. The hands go down. You're not up here somewhere. You put your hands in your pocket, keep them warm at the level you want to. Nice big pockets, great for the dog lead, that type of thing. There's a hood in the neck. It's just a roll away one. And I really liked it anyway. And so I still, I put it through the wash a few times and everything else. And and for me, it's that nice, really go-to, nice, cold day, wintry sort of coat. But I mention these things because, again, it's like everything. So the M90 Parka, I didn't know it was called that. I've just now looked this up. Watch it. M90 is also that Swedish leaf pile. I think they sometimes call it Swedish camouflage pattern. So separate, slightly different things. But I nearly fell off my chair when I looked up how much some of these were selling for now. Over a couple £100, you know, I was seeing. They're not all like that, you know, I'm sure you'll be able to find yourself one that way. Which again, back to these, and I don't want to sound like I'm gloating, but I'm so pleased I bought mine and some of the things I'm talking about when I did, because one of the other ones I got, what are you doing, Finn? I picked up this one, which is also one of those, oh, it's got caught, here we go. One of these, and I'll drop it on the other thing, but this one's actually got the bigger hood on it that goes all the way round, to large hood, so it goes over a helmet. I'll just drape it back on there so it's out of the way for the moment. But again, that one, it's got slightly more angled pocket tops to it. Look at the colours, slightly different, whether that's a slightly different material, but that's also one of these Swedish M90 Parkas. And I'm saying this because in the pocket, sometimes I was a bit interested that way. Excuse me. Coat price £8.50. So as I say, I don't want to sound like I'm rubbing it in, but that was, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago I picked that one up somewhere or other. And that sat in the back of my vehicle. We were filming when I was back at the Tank Museum. We had to go up to Salisbury Plain, and we were watching some with Ukrainian soldiers actually, and they were firing javelins and everything, and we were doing a little bit of filming there, and the wind was coming in over Salisbury Plain. You think you've dressed for the occasion, and it got colder and colder, and standing around waiting and things, it was... Anyway, I go to the back of the vehicle in one of my little boxes with a pair of wellies and everything else. This thing's rolled up there, put that on, put the hood up, and you just have that. And this is one of those things, I know people watching this one, what is that pleasure we have of a certain coat that seems to fit the occasion or gives you that lovely sense of warmth, security. It's just what you needed at that time. Nice deep pockets, etc. All those peculiar things. And I know some of you, you know, whether you're dog owners or hunting, shooting, fishers, or you just like getting out in the weather in the countryside. And that having that type of a garment, ooh, doesn't it feel good at the, you know, having the right thing there, which is another one. So because someone's mentioned this, and I can come back to it, but should we be talking about, you know, whether it is militaria or whether it's just my bigger phrase, dog walking coats? Because if you like the idea of talking about that, you know, well, how are you going to stop me? And it also gives me the excuse of getting stuff out the attic and bunging it on this stand here and talking about it. And the other side as well, I've just got to get rid of some of this stuff. So we were trying to work out is, should I put this as part of the Patreon raffle, or if I'm going to get rid of something, let you know if I've talked about it and I'm going to put it on eBay, or does that sound too commercial? I'm not sure how this comes across, but if I'm going to get rid of it, it'd be a real shame if someone put their hand up afterwards and said, oh, I was really interested in that or something. So I'll think that one through again. But anyway, but yes, the M90 Parka, thank you for pointing that one out to me. And maybe in the future, let's, if we're interested, let's go down that route and start talking about some of these other lovely bits of clothing and equipment. We'll come back to Denison's, maybe camo and some other stuff as well. Scott Grimwood, 8868. I'm in the USA, and in high school I read an abridged story of a British tank crew, probably Matilda, that is cut off during the Battle of France and their escape to Dunkirk. I can't remember the author or the name of the story. Have you heard of a book like this? Looking forward to more videos. So Scott Grimwood, I can imagine there's a number of guys watching this out there going, I know, I've got that one. And it made me straight away. It's the book, the abridged version. I'm not sure where that came from, but anyway, the book you were looking for is one called Tramp in Armour by Colin Forbes. And that's my copy that I read some time back. So Colin Forbes, it's a pseudonym. I wrote this one down for you. Raymond Harold Sawkins, 1923 to 2006. He was a British, served in the Second World War, ended up writing a whole range of different types of titles. This one, in terms of Tramp in Armour, I found it, there's bits of it far-fetched, but it's very well written and very good description. So he must have gone in a tank at some point in his service. And it follows basically this tank bird that was a Matilda as it's on its way back, trying to escape from the Germans as they go across France in 1940, as you mentioned. Sorry, that one. But another one to look out for. All these things, as I keep mentioning, I could talk about money all the time, but Finn, what are you doing? You can bring it to me. You're waking up a bit now. It's another one where have a little look around on the internet. Don't always go for the first one there, because sometimes you get these silly prices. But I found one there for about £5 if you're interested in buying a copy. That was my copy from many moons ago. Anyway, so that's that one. I think I've talked about that page. Yes, now, talking of Finn and that, a couple of you mentioned about the dog issues. So, Papa2625, he says, hello, beginning of this video is really hard for me to watch. I used exactly that prelude by Bark for my beloved dog goodbye video. He died 4 months ago and we all still miss him. Well, Papa2625, I know it's going to come to all of us. One of the great issues of owning a dog, Finn's getting on a bit, he's got some issues with him and things that way. He's getting a bit creakier in the mornings and that. We're going to have to say goodbye to them at one point. But, and I'll get choked up every time I even think of that moment. So my sympathy is with you, but I want to talk on because another person, Cycles Goff 9768, says, I would agree with you. Unfortunately, I'm not listening, too busy watching Finn. Lost my last golden retriever 2 years ago when I was 65. Couldn't bear thinking what would happen in the future. So I've settled for looking after my family and friends, dogs during holidays, etc. When I look back on my life, I regret not making friends with the Border Collie. So, Cycle Goff 9768, I've spoken to Finn about this, and he's basically saying you need to man up. Because what you've written might be very well thought through, but out there somewhere, what are you now then? That makes you about 67 something or other. You've still got it in you to look after another dog. And somewhere out there at the moment, sitting in some, I don't know, rescue place or home, is a dog that's looking for a mature guy who knows how to look after a dog and give it a good time to see it out. So I would say if you're ever in that position, you have the capacity, the willingness, the whatever else it is to look after another dog. There is such a range of dogs out there. I don't think it's got to be a puppy and you're looking 15 years hence. There's so many different dogs here that are going to be looking for a home. I just think, don't cut yourself off from it that way. Do the decent thing, look after the family ones and everything else. But I think, and it could even be a Border Collie out there, so it won't be this one you can look back on regret. You can look back on it with a sense of, actually, I got off on the backside and I had another dog. So I sound like I'm finger wagging already, but Cycle Goff 9768, there's my little prod to you. You've still got plenty of time for another dog in your life, and there's plenty of dogs out there looking for someone like you. Right, David Martin, 50, he's off. He's so disgusted with you, he's wandered off at the moment, but just think what your Labrador would have said to you if it had the chance. David Martin, 5044, I'm sure you'll go on and have a successful channel, thank you. I've done a fair bit of tall ship sailing, and I think the expression you were looking for early on, this was about Eric Newby, in his story, was learning the ropes. And I read that and I suddenly thought, you idiot, to me, because that's exactly the phrase that we pick up on when you go to a new job, you learn the ropes. And of course, that's the famous maritime phrase of when you went up on a ship and you had to learn about the sails and everything else, you were learning the ropes. It's a phrase that comes from the maritime background. Finn, bring it here, come on. And I just think, thank you for pointing out the obvious to me, even though I know you weren't trying to do it in that way. And phraseologies, all those things, the right word, I go back to because I keep forgetting it and I have to go and look it up every time. Do you know where you get the right word or the right phrase and the right things? There's a word, apricity, Apricity. It's the sensation in the cold of the winter of feeling the warmth of the sun on your face. What a word, apricity. But for some reason that won't stick in my head and I have to go and look it up. I know the word exists, but I don't do that way. So here we go. Lovely words out there. I'm sure we've all got favourites. Andy's models and stuff, 4306. I'm not sure what your question was. I've lost that one. Hang on, we'll come back. We'll come back to that one in a moment. I've talked about a couple of books. I'll come on to some more. Just those of you who did go out and buy things like Love and War in the Apennines, have you read it? Are you enjoying it? Put it back in the comments where you've got to, or if you actually get to the end of those ones, and then we think of what it does for you as a book, because I still think coming back to those things. Other suggestions, Alexander Hauser, 7648, he asked a question about what about the development of the steel helmet? Let's talk about that. Military watches is another suggestion that was done, so maybe I'll come back to these. Steel helmets, I've just got to tell you the story. When I left back in 2000, family home and various other bits and pieces, from the point of view of moving down to Dorset, I got tons of stuff that I collected over time. And there was a point, a very good friend of mine, I said, look, do you mind looking after some of this stuff? And only a couple of weekends ago, I went back to Eastbourne where I'd grown up and everything. And he got them out of the attic. I kind of knew there was stuff there, but I'd half forgotten what it was. And as he politely said, I think it's more than you thought you put here. And there was at least there was about 3 big kit bags full of tin helmets. That was that lot. There's still others I've got to go and pick up other places. But each one's got about 10 helmets in. So yes, I think let's do the story of the tin helmet, because for me, I got to it. Forgive me if you've heard me say this before. I love the sculptural shape of tin helmets, as well as the fact, we all know this overused word iconic. There's a British battle bowler. There's the American pot helmet. There's the German, with its such distinctive shapes, etc. So that idea of going through them, but I love their sculptural shape, and it goes back medieval armour and everything. I used to love all those sorts of things as well. But let's look at some of the ones I've got. And of course, nowadays, with these really good quality replicas that you can pick up, you don't have to sell a kidney just to get a tin hat. It is still within approachable prices. Come here. Oh, and there you go, and Finn on cue. And so there's my kind of question one for you from a distance there. What's that one? Where's that one come from? Okay, that was one that came out the bag. Right, let's keep going. Chuck Williams, E2V. I'm sure it's a very nice dog, but I found it a distraction. Right, let's move on. Ross McNeill, 10. Many thanks for putting some references. And I know Caroline Holland's come back to you. Thank you for the hot black. Any of you still bump into hot black around the place? If you think it's a reference Caroline might not have found, whack it on there, and that'll help with the biography of him when it comes. And thank you also for that description, because if you read back on that, there's a wonderful description of hot black in one of the memoirs, Clough Ellis's, I think, and that's really, says it for me about his bravery and what he was like and how people looked up to him, etc. CGM68, I have a question. It goes back to the Curator at Home playlist. You spoke to us of the Ship of Theseus back then. I was wondering what you feel about the Weald Foundation's restorations when compared to some less scrupulous workshops who care little about preserving honourable battle scars or authenticity? ? So I bridle a little bit at the tone of that question, because what I would say is, whoever you are and whatever vehicle you're restoring, you will know you have a budget, limits, whether that's time, energy, resources, all sorts of other elements that come into play, access to spare parts, etc. And what that key note is, unless you are, for example, perhaps a museum, perhaps you set yourself up as a foundation like the Weald Foundation, etc., unless you've got that written at the top of the page somewhere, this is what I'm about, or what this collection's about, or what this restoration is about, frankly, you've got to be honest and say it's almost up to you as the owner, restorer, individual, to work out what's the best method for you. So why I say that all the time is because if we have a tone that somehow someone's not done it right all the time, and I've seen some of these restoration jobs coming on where guys have done, I saw some a couple of weeks ago over at the Capel show, where what was basically the bottom section of an M3 Grant and a little bit of a, I think a Matilda came over as well. But you look at what they've been able to do to then put something in an arena to be shown that from a distance, in other words, if you go up, you realise this bit's fiberglass or something else, looks the part, drives around, gives us pleasures, been in a movie, helps all those things. And then to turn around and say, oh, but you haven't done it right, is complete bollocks, because they've done a fantastic job. They've really put that, you know, the way they've imagined it is overcome the problems, as if they're going to spend the rest of their lives waiting for that extra bit of armour, that extra bolt, etc., to appear from somewhere. And not everybody can remanufacture to the right standards. So aren't we pleased that we've got people like the Wheel Foundation that have got, you know, sadly Mike Gibb's not around anymore, but he left money for the foundation. The trustees very keen to see it keep going. And, you know, that are doing quality restorations to a standard and a degree that very few can match because of the resourcing and the time and the energy that goes into some of that. But I'd also go back to, you see, but there's across a spectrum there, but it doesn't mean to say it's a worse end of the spectrum when we see people putting things together. Of course, if there's a bit of history of the vehicle that, you know, you can keep, or where do we try and find things like, you know, bits of original paint, how do we protect that? How do we keep that vehicle's history that, you know, can we keep it as a log to pass on? But if it means that that vehicle never gets used, never gets aired, never gets done with, you know, I was reading a charming young lass's paper on how we should be preserving tanks into the future and everything. And basically, you know, in a dark room, suck all the air out and don't let anyone near it. Not sure that's going to work. You see what I mean? You know, so that idea of how do we keep the hobby going, we get more vehicles getting restored and out there, I think we need to recognise that range of a spectrum and be very careful when we make judgment tones, because as I was saying to a number of people, number one is when people go up to people and say, well, you got that wrong and use this one here and everything else, think about it before you open your mouth. Is it a helpful suggestion? Oh, look, I've got a photograph. Is that your vehicle? Blah, blah, blah. Think of the ways you might be able to do that. And also watch for the question that comes back, which is, well, let's see yours first. Okay? Shut up about things unless you think you're going to be able to contribute in a meaningful and a good way. And if we have got an opinion about something that we're not really sure that they're up to the right thing here, or it's going in the right direction, just again, think before we say it, walk in their shoes, have a look at what their aims and objectives are and what's going on that way. Because, you know, I always joke, you know, there's more SAS Jeeps out there, isn't there, today than or Land Rovers, and there ever probably was in service. But that idea, because people want that iconic bit rather than a boring, bog standard one, boring in inverted commas. So, you know, and we had that problem in the museums. Who's going to look after the standard Bedford 3-tonner? We all want the sexy stuff, but actually the Bedford 3-tonner, you know, that deserves to be looked after and one in a good military museum as a pristine example. But I'm waffling a bit, but here we go. But so that's where I say that one is how are we doing it? What are we doing it for? And also, you know, the points there, chipper thesis. If we are taking stuff off, what do we save? Maybe things in the future we'll be able to repair, restore, bring things back. So don't throw it all out, you know, keep it as part of the vehicle project. But even there, you know, that's assuming you've got the space. Thick. Am I saying that right? I would be interested to hear some of the unsung heroes during World War II, such as factory workers, women who delivered aircraft, munitions, etc. For my great joy, I'm going to a lady whose 100th birthday is coming up. She made Churchill tanks in the Second World War, and she opened our tank factory exhibition, and which was great, and the pleasure of being able to tell her that probably there was a tank she helped make in the factory up in Sheffield was probably helping her then new husband ashore on one of the D-Day beaches, joining the dots, if you see what I mean that way. But I will come back to some of those because yeah, manufacture is just, you know, just another thing. It just doesn't, everything doesn't happen without someone making it. And there's all those people that were part of that. And one thing as well, that they were part of a system that if we looked at it today, we wouldn't want to go near some of those factories as how they were making, not because they were doing it wrong, but back to the standards of the time, the accidents that happened, the conditions, you know, the things that, simple things, because they had to shutter up at night in case any light got out, because of, you know, from the point of view of German bombers, etc., that the heat and the fume build-up in some of the factories, people passing out because they couldn't get the ventilation going in the way they thought they could have been, because we had to have night shifts as well. And all these things, just amazing stories come out on that. Anyway, right, here we go. I'll keep going. Super stoked to see you back. Maybe this is our model guy on YouTube. I have a tank question I've not been able to find an answer to, and hopefully you can help me. I read in Anthony Beevor's Crete book, there were some Matilda II tanks on the airfields on Crete when the German paratroopers took the island, but they seem to have played a very minor or no role in the defence against paratroop assault. I wonder why were those tanks so ineffective? Were they operational at all, stock crewed, or just not utilised before it was too late? Thank you and glad to see you back. Well, I've just been writing an intro to a German wartime publication with some fantastic photography in it that hopefully is going to be reproduced sometime soon. And that looks at it from the wartime German point of view about what happened on Crete. But yes, the island does have, and I wrote down somewhere, here we go, it's got 6 Matilda IIs. 2 of those are parcelled out each to the 3 main airfields, which of course is what the German gliders and paratroopers are trying to capture. There's about 22 tanks all told, 16 light Mark 6Bs, although I have seen a photograph which looked like a British cruiser tank knocked out on the island as well. So whether they were all Matilda IIs, you know, still work to be done, as it were. The trouble was when they arrived, with 3rd Hussars had brought some across, they weren't able to effectively unload everything, and one of the ships that brings them over, they've got the tanks off, but then it's sunk, and the light aid detachment and the people and the spares are not got ashore. And these are tanks that have been sent from North Africa because we've had O'Connor's advance, he's beating, stuffing the Italians. Suddenly they're all called back because they've got to go back and help in Greece. That chance of completely knocking out the Axis forces in North Africa gives a chance for Rommel and the Africa Corps to arrive, etc. So, you know, again, in itself, a very interesting story there, all behind it. But these are already worn out tanks. And 2 of them, I won't go into each of the things, so there are 2 on each. Malame airfield, 2 are dug into the hillside. They're used in one counter-attack, one gets stuck on a rock. The other problem about the whole Cretan landscape rather is it's very rocky, narrow, not many metal roads. Things like the Matilda, one of them does get stuck on a boulder, another one breaks down. They don't have much of a time of it. They are used, and I've just got here, another one here. He says, did I bring it out? Crete? No, I didn't, damn it. I was going to read you Light 6Bs, Roy Farron is part of an attack, and he writes up the descriptions there. And if you're particularly interested, look out, I think it's After the Battle, does a whole piece on what happens out in Crete and with the tanks there as well. So there is a fair bit of information out there if you start hunting around. There's some good descriptions on the internet. I found a couple as well. So have a look at that. But again, another one of these. But sadly, the long and short of it is they are finding it hard because of the terrain. The Germans with the light 6Bs, they've got Roy Farron's attack. You know, he ends up having 1 crew wounded, a sort of temporary crew takes over, and various other. They basically just not have an opportunity to be used effectively. And interestingly, the Germans managed to land a couple of Panzer IIs where they've got a beach finally. So, my sincere apologies there. You'll notice a continuity issue. For some reason, the camera seems to have turned into a bit of a critic and turned itself off. So I think I pretty much got to the end of that Crete question. And let me jump straight on to the next ones, because if you hadn't quite realised, I was sat here, well, you won't know, but talking to myself for a while, but the camera was off. Let me try these ones. Here we go again. So, QA Library. David, my 2 books to add to the list: The Railway Man by Eric Lomax. At the end of the book, if you're not in floods of tears and you're not human, 50 years after its release, Lomax met one of the captors. He was a prisoner of war, Eric Lomax, and they made a film of the book in the last few years. Yeah, I've not actually seen, I've got the film, not actually seen it, read the book. It is stunning, very, very moving, and an amazing account. And if you're interested in Eric Lomax, his material, I think some of his papers, uniform, various other bits that he saved are up at the Royal Signals Museum in Blandford. So definitely worth a visit there if you're a bit of a Lomax fan. And QA Library also says, another recommendation, Eagle's Wings, the autobiography of a Luftwaffe pilot, Hey Joe Herman, translated from the German by Peter Hinchcliffe, OBE. I've not read that one, but thank you again. Keep them coming on that sort of stuff, because I know, again, I've got a couple of memoirs, Luftwaffe pilot memoirs in there, but I've not read those ones either, I don't think. Anyway, why A account? Oh God, I'll look at Lou's trying to read all these things. Something endearing about a bloke and his dog, just having a chat without the clutter of props, even if they're the best collection. I do have some props, I do apologise. My book would be Warriors for the Working Day. Absolutely go along with that. Peter Elstob, he died in 2002. He served in tanks in the Second World War. 1960, he does Warriors for the Working Day. And that wonderful title, I'm just going to read this to you because it's from Henry V. We are but warriors for the working day. Our gayness and our guilt are all besmirched with rainy marching in a painful field. There's not a piece of feather in our host. Good argument, I hope, we will not fly, and time has worn us into slovenly. But by the mass, our hearts are in the trim. And if you know the Henry V, it's basically the English army is full of dysentery. It's been marching back and forth. It is not looking its best out there, and especially when arrayed against what becomes the might of the French military with all its nice armours, its splendours, etc. But they are warriors for the working day, and that's how Peter Elstob sees the British Army in the Second World War. We might not be the prettiest looking lot, but somehow they're going to try and get it done. And he was with Buck Kite, I think it was, who gets 3 MMs. He was one of his tank crew for a number of for quite a period. And anyway, long and short of it, it is a stunningly good book. I picked it up as a paperback. I think when I was a youngster, I used to pick up cheap paperbacks in some bookstall in Seaside Road in Eastbourne. And I was pretty undiscerning back then. You know, you'd pick up something, read it, could be complete rubbish. And then you picked up, but I remember Warriors for the Working Day made an impression on me back then, that sense of, gosh, this is something special. And it's interesting, again, how we, whether it's by recommendation, randomness, whatever, somewhere, I tried to find it. I've got the paperback still somewhere in there, but I couldn't find it for this. But yeah, he's really great account, written as a novel, but you can tell pretty much everything in there must have happened. Super Crazy Joe 9105, for me, again, recommendation, it's The Man Who Worked on Sundays by Leslie Skinner. It's a difficult read at some points, but it really brings home the horrors of war. I cannot agree with you more on that one. I've got it here. I've referred to it a number of occasions in the past. Man Who Worked on Sundays, Personal War Diary, 2nd of June to May the 17th, 45, 2nd June 44, Reverend Leslie Skinner, and he goes along with the Sherwood Rangers. Now, the Sherwood Rangers are really fortunate because they've got quite a number of people who write great accounts during and after the war, and that have all been published. And of course, then James Holland comes along and does his Sherwood Rangers book, pulling all these ones together in a really nice way. So Skinner, I've used this because we took probably a couple of years ago now, the Padres around, Army Padres, where they're kind of working, you know, should war come again? What are we going to be doing? Whose role's doing what? And with Skinner, what's great about him, he's very honest. He explains why he does things. His argument all the way through is that, look, families need to know if he's buried their boy, he can write to the families and say, that's it, I buried him. There's no, don't have these, you know, mythic hopes, he might still be wounded somewhere, whatever. No, he wants to give them good factual information, and he thinks the guys deserve a proper burial. And another thing that Skinner's quite conscious of is with all these other young guys going into action in tanks, he could see how it would undermine their morale if they saw what happens to a tank crew that's caught in a burnt out vehicle. So he makes it his job to go along and take out the remains from some of these hit tanks, burnt vehicles. And he writes very movingly about it. And one of the things I was able to say to the Padres is, because, you know, we all doubt ourselves in these circumstances. What would I do? I'd run a mile, you know, type thing. And what Skinner's basically saying is, we are not built to do this, but you will find a way that you overcome your inhibitions, your fright, all these different things to be able to cope. And you know it's your job and your thing to do. And small point here, he's, I think it's Duke of Wellington's regiment, is it? He's with there, but anyway, he's on his way back. A Duke of Wellington's officer asked me if I would bury 2 of your chaps killed a week back in an attack on Crete. Seemingly the 4th, 7th men would have been lying in a ditch ever since. Really unpleasant and crawling. Scrounged some blankets and started to tie them up. Duke of Wellington's officer went away to be sick and did not return until I'd finished. They had dug graves for me, and I read the funeral service, and then was violently sick myself. So the way he says all these things, it really is a powerful read. Again, keep your eyes open, just simple little things. Home printed, type 1. Notebooks in the Imperial War Museum. Anyway, you know, great stuff again, and another one of those recommendations. Keep your eyes open, keep them coming in, because of course we see these sometimes, think, oh, not another one. What are the ones that really give you something extra on there? Paramarchy, can we get David a recipe for nettle soup as soon as possible? Great chat as always. Because of the nettles behind me, I cleared out some of all this behind me earlier on in the year and just let the nettles, it's all grown back up and everything, compost heap behind me somewhere. But here we go, Paramarchy. I do already make nettle soup. I do not need a recipe. I use Hugh Fernie-Whittingstall's recipe for the nettle soup, and I'm just saying this to you now because you can download one online or something, but have a go. You know, all that lovely phrase, try everything once apart from incest and country dancing. But nettle soup, I guarantee you, if you have a go at it, you'll be so impressed. You end up with this vivid green gunk of a soup, really rich and lovely. And it just, you can't help it. It makes you feel good eating it or drinking it, whatever way you look at it that way, because it's so healthy, it's so full of goodness and iron, you can almost, but in a nice way, you know, it's not one of those things that way. So have a go at nettle soup. Not this time of year, to try and all, unless you've got a good patch where brand new, you just need the tips of new young nettles rather than these slightly scraggly older ones as the season wears on. But have a go. Yeah, I think you'll be impressed. So I think that comes to the end of those questions. So my apologies again with continuity, the fact that I've had to redo this last little bit. Keep at it, and I will be looking out for your comments, questions, and we'll have another session like this one, and there's some other bits and pieces coming on that I'm filming already. So do subscribe, well, all those things I'm supposed to say, isn't it? Try and be a patron if you possibly can, and you'll get some extra stuff with being a patron. And thank you, and the dog who's now fast asleep in the sunshine over there. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. You've had to put up for a bit, haven't you, eh? I'm so sorry. Go on then.